So I'm going to talk about how you can work together to improve employment success for students and youth with disabilities. I know we've got a variety of folks in the audience, a lot of teachers, administrators, educators, but I know we also have some vocational rehabilitation folks and some other people related to adult services. So hopefully this information is going to help you all be able to think about how building collaborative partnerships can help improve outcomes for students and youth with disabilities. So I'm going to talk about the importance of interagency collaboration and how work experience requires partnership in order for students and youth to get competitive integrated employment, whether that's in school or after high school, but really thinking about how what we do in school leads to those positive outcomes in employment, education, and independent living, and just overall community engagement. I'm going to talk about considerations as you think about developing those collaborative partnerships, and then we're going to focus specifically on a couple of predictors of post-school success and some evidence-based practices that we know lead to positive outcomes for students, along with one very specific model of collaboration called circles. So I like to start, and I've found myself starting with this slide for a number of years now when I do talks or presentations or with our work with INTAC-C, for example. So this is a James Baldwin quote, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I think that's really important to think about that as we are working through some challenging times in addition to thinking about the challenges that our students and youth face as they transition into adulthood. So historically, what we know over time is that students with disabilities, students and youth with disabilities, do not experience the same post-school outcomes as their peers without disabilities. And while we've seen that change a little bit over time, it's still very true. We know that in addition to just in general students with disabilities, students' outcomes differ by race and disability. We know that persons with disabilities tend to have lower levels of education than those without disabilities, and that individuals of color are more likely to have lower outcomes in the areas of education, employment, community engagement, and independent living. These are just some statistics from the Office of Labor, the Department of Labor at the federal level, that really looks at the labor workforce of youth. And so what they found, this is a 2024 report, is that we see similar outcomes, that youth with disabilities experience less participation in the workforce. So you can see age 16 to 19, the differences between youth with disabilities and youth without, and age 20 to 24. That participation in the workforce is lower for individuals with youth with disability than those without a disability. The next table is focused on the unemployment rate. So when we think about youth age 16 to 19, youth with disabilities have a higher unemployment rate than those without a disability. Age 20 to 24, similar. So you can see it's about double the unemployment rate for youth with disability versus those without. So just a few statistics there to get you kind of thinking about the fact that it's critically important, as you all know, that we're preparing youth with disabilities while they're in high school to gain competitive, integrated work experiences and those skills needed to really participate fully in the workforce in a competitive, integrated setting. So one of the things that we know is a positive predictor of post-school outcomes for youth with disabilities is interagency collaboration. We know that when students with disabilities have access to collaborative services while they're in high school, they're more likely to have positive outcomes in the areas of education, employment, and independent living. And we're starting to see that when youth are connected with those services, that they are getting connected with employment opportunities while they're in school, whether that be paid or unpaid employment. So I'm a firm believer that interagency collaboration or building collaborative partnerships at the school and community level are really the key to helping students and youth gain the skills that they need and get connected with services and supports so that they've got those connections when they leave high school. So this is a crazy figure, and I'm sure you can't read all the pieces, but this is what we call a day in a fragmented system. And Carrie Sjogren and Dave Wittenberg, two researchers in the field of secondary transition, wrote a paper that included this figure. And to me, it really says everything about all the things that students and youth have to navigate as they transition into adulthood and even while they're in school. So at the center is the family and the student. And as you see the various arms there, there's health, there's the support systems that need to be in place, there's those recreation and community things that students and youth need to do and have supports to do while they're in school and post-school. There's advocacy and leadership. There's really thinking about the assessments that have to be done both in school and post-school in order for them to be able to attain the outcomes that are positive and be really engaged members of their community and of society. And so I like to share this because I think it gives a really nice visual of all the things, and there's probably even more. So in thinking about that, we know that successful collaboration helps ensure that students experience positive post-school employment outcomes, that it helps ensure that transition services can be developed with clearly defined and understood roles and responsibilities, and it really helps youth be better connected with their community and workplace opportunities. So when we think about considerations for partnerships, I think as you go through today and tomorrow, and you're interacting and networking with folks and hopefully connecting with some of the VR folks and some of the other adult service folks that are here, that you think about some questions as you are going into your sessions. Who are you partnering with? Who are you partnering with at your school to really help ensure that your students with disabilities are getting the services, supports, and skills needed to transition successfully into adulthood? What does each partner bring to the table? What shared outcomes do you have? And can you identify shared outcomes with the folks that you're already partnering with at your school or at your agency, or are you partnering together? How do you include students and families as partners? They are the critical piece, right? A lot of times it's hard. We've learned in a lot of our work that, and just as being an educator, that a lot of times families don't feel engaged and they don't necessarily understand all of the things that their child needs to access in that fragmented system. And so including those students and families, and specifically student voice in the process, is critically important. So thinking about how you include students and families. And then beyond just kind of the interagency piece where you're collaborating with vocational rehabilitation, for example, or employers within your community, how are you collaborating and not being siloed with other people within the school, within the education system itself? So thinking about how you are partnering with general education. Are you partnering with your school counselors to help ensure your students are getting access to career technical education, for example? example. How are you partnering with career technical education? We know that when students have opportunities to do a sequence of courses related to career technical education, that they're more likely to have positive outcomes. So it really goes beyond just those community partners and agency partners, but it's the school partners to help ensure that you're not, that students and youth with disabilities aren't in a silo and they're really getting those meaningful opportunities while they're in school. So in thinking about those partnerships, identifying roles and responsibilities is critical. So engaging families, working directly with students, creating work and other experiences while students are in school so that they understand what the world of work means. And not just providing work opportunities, but work opportunities that are aligned with students' strengths, areas for growth, and their goals, both their in-school IEP goals as well as their post-school goals. And then partnering with other agencies, I've mentioned that, and then thinking about other roles and responsibilities that are needed in order for students to meet the outcomes that they desire and provide that seamless transition into life after high school. So what we know about outcomes of collaboration is that it leads to aligned resources and decreased duplication of service development and delivery. It increases family engagement and student and transition planning. It allows for alignment of IEP goals along with IPE goals, individualized plans of employment. It leads to student-led IEPs, and it really leads to building students' self-advocacy and self-determination skills. So when you've got collaborative pieces and partners in place, and students are involved in that process, their self-determination and self-advocacy skills grow, which we also know is another one of our strong predictors of positive outcomes, that when students have strong self-advocacy and self-determination skills when they leave high school, they're more likely to be able to advocate for themselves in adult life. It makes sense, but we also know that a lot of times our students aren't leaving high school with those skills. And then it also increases the likelihood that students are going to achieve competitive integrated employment after high school. And so I'm going to now go into, now that I've kind of provided an overview, and you'll probably hear me say a lot of the same things over and over, because I truly believe that this work is important, and the work that you all are doing to prepare students and youth for that transition is critically important to their lives and the lives of their families. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the secondary transition, evidence-based practices, and predictors of post-school success. But I want to give you some context first so that you can think about kind of the differences between what an evidence-based practice is and what the predictors are. And so evidence-based practices are those practices that occur in the classroom, in the school, or in the community that provide students skill development around self-determination skills, work skills. Community-based instruction is another example of an evidence-based practice that is provided to students to help build those skills they need to be ready for that transition into adult life. And so community-based instruction would be a practice. Another example of a practice is what we call goal time, which is a self-determination intervention. So it's those strategies that you use to help students develop those skills. When we think about the predictors are those experiences that students have while they're in high school that we know lead to positive post-school outcomes. And so they sometimes are related to skill development, but they also might be related to building interagency partnerships or getting students access to career technical education. And so they are the things that we know that happen in school that lead to positive post-school outcomes. And so when schools and agencies are using evidence-based practices and your transition programs are aligned with the predictors of positive post-school outcomes, we know that that's going to potentially lead to students and youth with disabilities attaining positive outcomes when they leave high school. In addition to the predictors and the evidence-based practices, and the arrows on this graphic are a little wonky, but we know that the predictors and the practices together work, but we also know that those alone aren't going to necessarily lead to positive outcomes for youth and students and youth with disabilities. We need to ensure that there are school, family, and youth partnerships that promote family involvement, youth empowerment, and collaboration, in addition to school and community engagement, ensuring that youth have access to community resources, work-based learning opportunities, service learning opportunities. And all of that together builds what we consider translational knowledge or knowledge mobilization, because when everybody works together, that's when barriers start to break down, and you start to see really positive outcomes that lead to systems change with sustainable practice and equitable opportunities for all of our students and youth with disabilities. So these are the in-school predictors of post-school success. There's a few missing here. There's actually 23 that we've identified, but I couldn't fit them all on the slide. However, if you come to the next breakout session, you will get the full list of all of the predictors. Most of them are here. But what I've highlighted with the red rectangles are the employment predictors. So we've got career awareness. So that's really about making youth aware of what it means to be in the workforce and being aware of all the opportunities that are out there for really getting a job and understanding what that means and what the world of work means. The next one, which I've mentioned already, is career technical education. One of our strongest predictors, again, just to reiterate that we know a lot of times what we know about students participating in career technical education, and CTE looks different across states, so I'm not completely certain about what it looks like in Illinois, but what we know is that a lot of times students and youth with disabilities are taking CTE courses because it's an elective, because they just need to fill a space in their school day or their semester, and that's good that they get that opportunity to take that course, but if it's just an elective, they're not really getting that sequence of courses that help them build the skills that they need related to the employment outcome that is linked to their goals. So really thinking about how to get access to career technical education in a meaningful way is critically important. Community experiences is another predictor that really aligns with employment, but also interagency collaboration. We know that when students have opportunities to get work experience, to get social skills experience, to get self-determination, self-advocacy experience in the community, they're more likely to understand what that means and what their options are within the community. So getting those opportunities in high school is critically important. Then interagency collaboration, I've already talked about that as a predictor. We also have occupational courses that if students have opportunities to participate in any kind of occupational courses while they're in school, that's critically important, and that aligns with CTE as well. And then paid employment work experience. The research tells us that when students with disabilities have work experience in high school, they're more likely to have positive outcomes outcomes. And it doesn't have to always be paid experience. It's access to apprenticeships, internships, job shadowing, just so that they can understand the world of work while they're in school, that can help them attain those post-school goals. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight is student support, which is critically important, that students are connected with the services and supports and that they have a support network while they're in school, so that that network can help support them when they leave school. And it's not just about students, it's about families as well. I think you probably saw in the Day of Fragmented System graphic that, families are at the center and families need to know how to navigate, regardless of the ability level of their child. So I'm going to talk about two of the predictors in a little bit more detail. And the first one that I want to talk about is paid employment work experience. So one of the things, as Stacy mentioned, in the next session, I'm going to share with you all what we call our predictor implementation self-assessment. And it is a tool that schools and agencies can use to really evaluate their programs to ensure that they're aligned with what we know the research says. So paid employment work experience is one of our strongest predictors. And what we've done, nobody wants to read, some people like to read research articles, and they do that for pleasure. Probably Stacy and I are two of those people. But educators don't necessarily have the time to do that, and a lot of times the research is difficult to understand because it's not written in a practitioner-friendly way. And so what we've done at ICTW is we have operationally defined each of the predictors so that they can be used by educators and adult service providers, and really so that you all can think about how your programs are aligned with the predictors of post-school success. We, meaning myself and my team at ICTW, we're not the only ones that operationally define these. We asked the field, we asked educators, we asked VR, we asked researchers, we asked families to help us define what these mean based on what the research tells us. And so work experience we've defined as any activity that places the student in an authentic workplace and could include work sampling, job shadowing, internships, apprenticeships, and paid employment. And then paid employment is what it is. It can include existing standard jobs in a company and organization, customized work experiences negotiated with an employer, but these activities always feature competitive pay. And I think that's critically important that we're thinking about that for our students and youth, that they are getting those competitive, integrated, paid employment work experiences. And so we've operationally defined each of the predictors, but in addition, with the work that we did, we asked all of those people that we brought together to help us identify not only the operational definition, but what are the characteristics that go with each of the predictors. And that's really what the predictor implementation self-assessment, or PISA as we call it, allows you to do, to really evaluate your programs based on the characteristics. So these are just a few of the characteristics of paid employment work experience. There are a number of these in our PISA. But I just wanted to share a few here. So thinking about the characteristics, are you providing opportunities for students to participate in job shadowing, work study, apprenticeships, internships? Are you providing instruction in soft skills? So thinking about all those skills that students need in order to be successful in the world of work. So problem solving, communicating, responding to feedback, self-determination skills, occupational specific skills. I often argue, I had a colleague tell me that their state didn't have a priority around transition, and that they were focused on academics and not transition, and so they were focused on reading and math and all the things and not transition. And I had an argument in that, aren't all those things transition skills? Don't students need reading skills to be able to participate in the world of work? They may not have to be fantastic readers, but those skills are critically important too. So I would say that that instruction in soft skills is important, but also those academic skills are critical as well. And so when we think a lot of times about IEP goals, for example, a lot of times IEP goals are very much focused on, a goal for reading or a goal for math, and those all impact the transition into adult life. The other two characteristics I have here are providing opportunities for transportation training, including using public transportation, and thinking about job site and community safety. Transportation, one of our newest predictors are travel skills. We know that when students understand how to get around their community, and they're more likely to have positive outcomes. So really thinking about that related to paid work and employment and work experience is important, and it looks different. Transportation's hard. That's one of the biggest barriers that we have found that schools and communities face, especially very rural communities. You guys have a lot of very rural communities here in Illinois, as do many of actually all of the states have very rural communities. And so transportation's hard. And so really thinking outside the box as to how do we help students understand what their options are within the community. And then the final one is conducting job performance evaluations based on students, school staff, and employers. So that's transition assessment, basically, but really helping students figure out what they want to do for a job and what skills they need, and assessing school staff and employers related to what those needs are. So that's the first predictor I'm going to talk about. And the next one, imagine this, interagency collaboration, another predictor of positive outcomes. And so we've identified the operational definition as a clear, purposeful, and carefully designed process that promotes cross-agency, cross-program, and cross-disciplinary collaborative efforts leading to tangible transition outcomes for youth. And so with that one, we also have the characteristics, and I've listed a few here for you to think about as you go through the next couple days and take information back with you. So the first one is developing an agreed upon vision and mission of transition and services and programs. So as you're working, for example, with your pre-ETS counselor or your VR counselor, do you guys have the same mission and vision for what you want for students and youth with disabilities? And that's critically important, because if we don't have the same mission and vision, then you're gonna have a silo and you're not gonna be collaboratively doing the work. It's also about developing an organizational structure that includes identifying who needs to be at the table. And when I talk about circles in a little bit, you'll hear me talk about kind of all the people that you can think about as you are taking away this information and thinking about the partnerships that you have and how you might build further partnerships beyond just the people that you're currently collaborating with. Coordinating the development of policies and procedures for service delivery and sharing resources at both school, with your school partners as well as your community partners. And so how do those resources share and how are you not duplicating resources? And then developing procedures for problem solving that address the needs and the barriers that students and youth with disabilities face. And really, when you have those partnerships, that's where you can really start thinking about what are those barriers in the community. Is transportation a barrier? How are we going to solve that barrier? And I'll give some examples of that in just a bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about strategies for teachers, schools, and community service providers that can focus on implementing the employment predictors of post-school success. So the graphic here looks at, work experience, the skills that students need, apprenticeships, and all the things that they're going to do for a career that can lead to a profession once they leave high school. And so when we think about evidence-based practices that focus on the employment predictors, we think about how do we embed career-focused real-world experiences for students and youth? How do we foster student self-advocacy and self-determination? How do we help secure unpaid and paid work experiences while students and youth are in high school? How do we leverage career technical education? How do we foster collaboration? How do we provide community-based instruction to build essential work skills? I believe we currently have 32 evidence-based practices and research-based practices. I do not have time to go through all 32 of those today, but I want to talk about one in particular that's called CIRCLES. And let me see if I can say the really long acronym that you'll never remember, but you can remember it as CIRCLES. CIRCLES is a research-based model of interagency collaboration. It's communicating interagency relationships and collaborative linkages for exceptional students. It is the only research-based model of collaboration that we've identified through the center, meaning that there's research to support it. We look at CIRCLES as it's a model of interagency collaboration, but the work that we've been doing with CIRCLES is really led us to believe that it's just a really good model of transition planning. And it really is a model that helps build collaborative partnerships, not only with adult service providers and agencies, but community partners along with school partners as well. And so I wanted to share this model because we are currently implementing this model in 4 states. Michigan, we are in Oakland County Schools, which is a very large suburb very large county that's a suburb of Detroit, and it has bunches of districts within it. Oakland County probably is as big as the state of Kansas, related to population size. And so we're in Michigan, we're in Kansas, we're in Arkansas, and we're in Tennessee. And we're learning that through implementation of this model across right now 42 high schools, we'll have 72 next year, that students are getting jobs. Students are going into higher ed. Students are going to community college based on their goals. Students are getting connected with the services and supports they need while they're in school in order to have positive outcomes. And so, again, why circles? It is the only research-based model. We know interagency collaboration is a positive predictor of post-school success, but the model itself supports transition under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So it's not just a model that we know is research-based. We know that it aligns with what the federal law tells us we should be doing as educators and service providers. So at the heart of the model is the individual student. It really is about the student, and the model itself, it has a community level team, a school level team, and then the IEP team, which is at the core of the model. The community level team is made up of, it looks different across the communities and schools that are implementing the model across our 4 states. The model's actually, we're not doing research anymore, but in North Carolina, but that was done a while ago, and we've got a lot of schools in the Charlotte area that are implementing the model. And so it's very contextual, but the community level team really is made up of people like you all, as well as community partners. For example, the Chamber of Commerce. Somebody from a Chamber of Commerce might sit on a community level team. And that community level team is really there to help identify barriers to students accessing services and supports within the community. So that team really focuses on what's happening and what are the needs of students and youth with disabilities at the high school or high schools within a specific community. That team really also includes a special education teacher who will come and talk about the needs, the areas of growth, the strengths of their students, so that that team can really sit together and talk about how can we get students access to transportation, access to employers within the community, access to the community college. And so that team then really thinks about who then needs to sit on the school level team. And the school level team, as my colleague and project coordinator says, is where the magic happens. And so the school level team is where students and families actually come together with individuals that can help them identify the transition services and activities that they need while they're in school in order to attain their post-school goals. And so at the school level team meeting, students, an individual student will present on their goals, their strengths, their areas of growth, and then they'll have a conversation with this team that's there to talk about what they need to do in order to gain the skills while they're in high school to get the job of their dreams. So I'm going to give a real-life example of a school-level team meeting of a student who wanted to be a gamer when he left high school. That's big. Lots of our students want to do that now. And this student was a student with autism, and the school, and presented to his school-level team. So to give you a little bit of context, the school level team meeting is a much more informal meeting than an IEP meeting. So it really builds that community that the student and family needs. So this particular student wanted to be a gamer, and they were at their school level team meeting and presented, and the special education teacher had invited, they were in a pretty affluent area in Northwest Arkansas where Walmart headquarters is. And for the community level team, the special education teacher said, Walmart headquarters could be a great employment option for our youth within our community. And so they invited a CEO from Walmart headquarters to sit on the community level team. While they were talking, and the special education teacher was talking to the community level team and talking about some interests of their students, and she said, I've got 2 students that are interested in gaming and being gamers. And the CEO from Walmart, who was sitting on that community level team, said, we have a gaming department at Walmart headquarters. I can send the head of that department to the school level team meeting to talk with the student about what it would be, what they might need to do to become a gamer. And so this particular student did their presentation, and then it was opened up for the discussion about how that student's going to reach their post-school goals. And the individual who came from the gaming department at Walmart told this particular student, it's amazing how much you know about the ins and outs of gaming. Have you thought about esports? And he was like, no, I haven't thought about esports. And he said, and so then the guy, the head of the gaming department said, well, there's esports teams at, I think, Utah State. He named a couple of different ones. I think there's probably a lot more now. And so they, the special education teachers taking notes, and then they said, well, have you thought about, if you're going to go to college? The other team members started chiming in and said, have you thought about going to college? And, now esports might be an option. Have you completed your FAFSA? The student hadn't completed his FAFSA. And so the conversation went, and as the meeting ended, the special education teacher was able to leave with specific transition activities that the student could do to reach that post-school goal of being a gamer. So going back and investigating esports opportunities at universities or community colleges, completing the FAFSA. And so that school level team is really where the magic happens, and a lot of those transition services and activities come out of that meeting that are then taken back to the IEP team for consideration. And then the IEP team, if there's a barrier, so that particular student was offered an internship at the gaming department at Walmart headquarters because of those connections. But when it got to the IEP team, one of the barriers was transportation. How is the student going to get there? And so the IEP team takes that information back to the community level team, and it's that cyclical process to help figure out what those barriers are so that students can attain those goals. So that's the model, and what we're finding through the model is that students are getting jobs while they're in school or work experiences while they're in school, in addition to getting connected to agencies and all the things that they need before they leave high school. And so I talked earlier about thinking about your considerations related to who you're collaborating with. And these are just some, very short examples of what what those teams might look like and people who you might consider as you are thinking about those collaborative partnerships. So administrators, school personnel I've talked about. I've talked about some of the community personnel. We have SILs represented here, which is great. Thinking about disability services at your local community college or your university that's in a specific area. For example, University of Illinois, do you have disability services at the table when you're helping students figure out what they're going to do and what their needs are post-school? And then thinking about other community members, do you have business owners at the team? Have you gone out and talked to business owners? Some of our examples of folks that just shared are excellent examples of how you're connecting with businesses in your community to help students get those integrated experiences. A lot of our schools that are implementing circles have Chamber of Commerce at the table because Chamber of Commerce knows about businesses in the community and they can help you connect with those individuals. And a lot of it's done just by cold calling or going and knocking on somebody's door. So what we found is that students are getting jobs. So I was going to share this video. We were having technical difficulties, but I will share resources in just a minute. And on our Circles website are some examples. And this is a parent example of her child who had not really gotten connected with any services in the community and participated in Circles and got connected with, the student was interested in graphic design. The graphic design teacher from the local community college came to the school level team meeting, and that student is now taking classes at the community college. She graduated, and she's also started her own business. So you can look at some of those success stories on our website. So I'm going to leave you with this so that we have a few minutes for questions. Again, thinking about as you go through the next couple of days and then as you move back into your roles, how do you determine roles and responsibilities when providing students with employment opportunities? How do you involve families in the process? Again, that family engagement piece. How has your collaboration changed over time related to providing work experiences for students and youth? And I would say, maybe if you don't have great collaboration, how are you going to build those collaborative partnerships over time to help ensure that your students and youth are connected with the services and supports while they're in high school to help ensure they have positive outcomes? And then I'll go back to the James Baldwin quote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And hopefully, I think you all know that that is very true. You're doing great work and doing great things for your students. So hopefully today and tomorrow will give you some really great ideas to go back and think about what those partnerships are and what you can do moving forward.